So recently there's been a little controversy on one of our TikToks where some of my beloved Songpsychers are leaving me because they think that Day and Night by Kid Cudi is in E minor. I've made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment, and I don't expect to be forgiven. Just kidding, the song is in B minor. Let's talk about why. In almost every song, there's a home base which serves as the center point where the harmonies, melodies, or general song is based around. That's called the root, and we can usually determine this by listening to the harmonies and the melodies and finding patterns or repetitions that point us toward that home base. So then how do we determine what a chord is in a song? Well, we always look to the root note of each chord first, and then we look at the other notes in the chord and see how it relates to the root note. So let's look at the bass line of the song, where the root always lives. In this case, we already have a major clue in the bass line of Day and Night. So for the entire first half of the phrase, it's transitioning through chords. But in the second half of the bass line, it's just the B minor chord. But Devin, the bass does go to B, but after that, it goes to a D. Doesn't that mean the chord changes? Well, guess what? That D is actually just the B minor chord, but in the first inversion. What? Crazy. How do we know this? Well, let's take a little detour down the world of diatonic chords. For every key, there's set chords in that key. Let's take C major, for example. We know that C major has no sharps and no flats. So, to find the chords in that key, you'd play the chords in thirds up the piano. These chords are known as diatonic chords. If a chord deviates from this, we'll have to check and see if it's a borrowed chord. Now let's find the diatonic chords of B minor. We know that B minor has F sharp and C sharp. So, to find the diatonic chords of B minor, we play the chord scale using F sharp and C sharp instead of F and C. So we've found the diatonic chords of B minor. Now let's take a look at the other notes in that D chord in the bass line. If the root is a D, since we are in the key of B minor, we would expect the other notes to be F sharp and A because that's diatonic. But instead, the other notes are F sharp and B, which tells us that the chord is something we need to think harder about. What diatonic chord do the notes D, F sharp, and B form? And if it doesn't form a diatonic chord, we have to check to see what kind of borrowed chord it is. But then we play them on the piano and we realize, oh, it's just a B minor chord, but in the first inversion. So now we know that the B minor chord takes up a lot of space in the song. Also, the E minor chord is used very briefly as this little, transition. Doesn't really get that much attention. Now let's take a look at the harmony in the chorus. This is the chord progression in the chorus. That's weird, you say. That third chord clearly has a D sharp in it when there's no D sharp in B minor. If we're in the key of B minor, that is not diatonic. Interesting point. Yeah, there is a B major chord in the chorus, but let's talk about it. Whenever we find a chord that's not diatonic, that means we have to look deeper. We enter the world of borrowed chords, and in this case, the first type we check is for a secondary dominant because it's the most common non-diatonic borrowed chord. But first, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe button and ring the bell for more epic pranks. We already know about dominant chords and how powerful that 5-to-1 chord relationship is. Well, buckle up, because secondary dominants utilize that power and make even more interesting chord progressions. So in music, the dominant is the 5th scale degree of the diatonic scale, but the secondary dominant is an altered chord having a dominant relationship to a chord in the key other than the tonic. And by altered chord, I mean that secondary dominants are not part of the song's natural key. Here's an example of this. Here's a chord progression. Pretty cool, right? But now, here's the same chord progression with a secondary dominant. The A major chord has a dominant relationship with the D minor chord since it's a fifth above D minor. And since A major is not in the natural key of F major, it's an altered chord, making it a nice little secondary dominant. Now back to that chord in the chorus of Day and Night. It's a B, a D sharp, and an F sharp. And that's a B major chord. But what in the does that mean? Who cares? We immediately look at the chords around it for clues and realize, oh, the chord immediately after this is the E minor chord. And what's the interval between B and E? You guessed it, a fifth. So, B major has a dominant relationship with E minor. And since B major isn't in the key of B minor, this makes it an altered chord. So, this doesn't indicate that the song is in E minor because that B major is actually the secondary dominant chord to the E minor, baby. So now that we've established the weird chord in the chorus, we can also establish that the key of Day and Night by Kid Cudi is B minor, baby. Yeah! Also, now you know all about how to figure out the chords of a song, what diatonic chords are, and a little bit about secondary dominants. Yeah! One-stop shopping. That's what you get here.